Hi, this is Elliot Fishman, and welcome to Facebook Live. And today it's a real privilege. We have our teaching conference, our special research conference, and our speaker tonight will be Reed Jobs from Emerson Collective. And Reed, welcome.
Thank you so much, Elliot.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What you're going to be speaking tonight about a lot of the work you're doing at
That's
Emerson.
Right. Yeah, I'm the health director there, which means I invest in oncology research projects in companies which focus on cancer, and in a few other larger partnerships with big people who are trying to work in the cancer space to help the patient experience.
And so I know we have a limited amount of time, but from your perspective, what do you think are the most exciting areas in cancer research these days?
Certainly, there's quite a lot of immunotherapy right now that's really fascinating. Cell therapies are really in a really cool place right now. Liquid biopsies are really in an interesting place right now, and especially I'm interested in machine learning being applied to a lot of different cancer fields, especially in radiology.
And what's your thought about machine learning in general, deep learning and everything?
I think we're at the very tip of the iceberg for its application. I think it's going to go directions in the next 10 years that we don't really anticipate, and I think its application in medicine is going to really help a lot of patient lives.
And I know in terms of just oncology in general, obviously research in oncology has been going on for decades. Some successes, some lack of successes. What do you think that you can bring to the table that could make this success? I mean, all of our lives depend on discovery. I mean, I guess there was some good news yesterday about immunotherapy with some of the lung cancer.
Yes, lung cancer in the New York Times, exactly.
But where do you see
really
that yourself making a difference in in changing, and I think for patients, things take too long. We want cures today, we want solutions today. How do you think you can change that?
Well, I'm pretty damn impatient too, Elliot. I'll tell you what I really think though is we've entered a new new age of cancer research right now. But the crazy thing is that the NIH has not increased its budget, and they mostly reject people based on audacity, and they only evaluate really largely based on prior history. So it's really hard for young people to actually get federal grants. So it's a huge opportunity for philanthropists to engage with researchers directly, because the pool of money that they have to work with is just frankly diminished from what it was 10 years ago. And more than that, people really want to start companies. Drugs are really what make a difference in patient lives, and to be able to influence the development of drugs from the universities through their time in biotech companies is something that I really focus on, because frankly the field is not as fertile as it once was.
What do you think for a junior researcher? I mean, I know you're dealing with a lot of your grants with the people, as you say, who are new. Mm-hmm. What do you think what are the challenges for a junior researcher?
One of the main challenges is that tenure is largely based on citation, so there's a huge incentive to just publish and kind of publish ad infinitum and keep searching, keep chasing grants and whatnot, which both kind of burns out physicians, does not help their productivity, does not necessarily yield to better results because it encourages incrementalism, and more than anything, it doesn't really allow them to start new companies in the best way.
And how do you think you can change that?
I think I can change that by working with them and bringing to them the tools that they need to do all this, be it capital, be it space, or be it management teams.
Right, and I think the management team, as you say, is probably one of money is always critical. We all know that, but I think you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the you don't have the people who have the skill set to make it happen, I think that's one of the biggest problems.
It is, but it's actually even more so for biotech companies, because it's not a software company where the technical expertise is an engineer who you might be able to replace. In a biotech company, the scientific expertise is far more valuable. So in a lot of ways, you kind of want to let management get out of the way of the science. Not at all to have like an absolute division between the two, but you sort of just want to let the researchers do what they want to.
And I know Hopkins is one of the institutions that's benefited from the grants. So how do you look at grants when you're looking? So like for example, at Hopkins we had 50 grants submitted for this cycle. What are you looking for more than anything? Is it innovation? Is it the researcher? Is it the topic?
Ultimately, so I'll just step back and say for each grant cycle, I have a scientific advisory board which helps me. I don't have a PhD, so I need specialist help, and so does every philanthropist, really. Ultimately, though, I'd say that I just try to see where the field is directly. You kind of have to deal with each scientific department as it comes. For instance, when I deal with immunotherapy grants, oftentimes they're a lot more ready for the clinic because the science is in a more mature state. Metabolic targets, on the other hand, need more investment in basic research because they still haven't really been able to translate yet. And I think those investments are crucial for realizing that in future drugs. So I really kind of let the science lead the way.
And in looking, I know in many ways all of us learn from other people,
yes,
the good and the bad. Who have you seen that really does this well, has done philanthropy well in this space?
I actually have to say I have a good amount of respect for Sean Parker in this space. I think the really successful philanthropists in this space are ones which have a technology that they focus on, and then they try to apply it to a lot of different areas. The Broads sort of did this with genomics about 15 years ago, where they decided to be the world-class experts in genomics, and they applied it to a lot of different medical fields. Parker's doing this in a more narrow way, but still immunotherapy is quite broad, and he's been focused quite diligently, and I have a lot of respect for his whole process there.
Right, he's the one who's actually trying to get like 5 institutions to work together?
Well, they've agreed to. He's largely been able to achieve it. The organization's still early, and those relationships are still being tested, but I'm really impressed with what he's been able to do.
Right. And anybody, and then I know you've been working with the Biden Institute, right?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, and but all of these, I guess that's the question: is how do you, as you say, how do you solve a problem? You can't solve all the problems at once. How do you focus?
Mm-hmm.
And how hard is that? How much of a challenge is that for you?
It's probably one of my biggest challenges. We had a lot of inbound, but you really just need to have a pretty strict scientific or patient-focused theory and go from there. So you kind of have to get good at saying no to things, which is what I need to get better at.
Right. And then, so in following that up, so I'm pretty familiar, minimally familiar, with how things work at Hopkins. I can name a lot of really good institutions, but I know very little. I know that you spent the last couple of years going both in the U.S. and Asia and Europe looking at institutions. What do you see as good models? What institutions, forgetting the name of the institutions if you don't want to mention them, how do you separate those that are successful? What are they doing? What do you like to see when you're looking at an institution?
I like to see that the institution cares a lot about the experience of the researchers. There are very few which actually do this well. A lot of, take Epic for an example, which is the electronic health record, which most places use, is designed as a billing system, and the interface for physicians is terrible. It decreases productivity. I've yet to find someone who's a champion for it. So there's a lot of examples like that where many institutions really care more about profits necessarily than the people working in them. So when that gets to change, you usually see better results. The second thing I'd say is a lot of universities, including Hopkins, have noticed that when their faculty make companies, they often make more money, honestly, on royalties. So a lot of places, including here, they have set up incubators for faculty to start companies. It's called Fast Forward here. This is happening all over the place in the U.S., and I'd say it's a really good model to encourage translation.
And do you think it's going to work? You've seen examples where it works?
I have seen examples where it works, yeah. It's pretty young here, so I think that remains to be seen, but absolutely.
Thanks, well. So what recommendations do you do? So for investigators, so if I was one of the institutions that you're supporting, is there any specific topics you like to see, or is it just really just good science wins the day? Good
science always wins the day. I can't say there's any special formula. We explicitly ask for audacity and innovation, but we really just let the science be our teacher.
That's great. And so where do you think things going? I mean, do you see the major discoveries? I mean, it's always hard to guess when discoveries will happen because, one day it's not there, the next day it's there, and it's kind of like planning a lot of things that just never work out or do work out. Do you see, where do you see, in your mind, where do you see the next set of discoveries coming along?
If I had to guess, I'd actually say the next big amount of innovation is going to actually be centered around patients. It's going to be centered around patient control of data. And I think the relationship between patients and researchers is largely going to go away. And researchers are going to get to know the patients whose data they're working with. So that's one thing I think is going to happen, and that'll be linked with patient electronic health record interoperability, which I hope will happen soon nationally.
Right. I think that's a great point. I think one of the things that everybody complains about, the patients complain, and surely the physicians complain, is that we have so much information with so little knowledge.
Yes.
Patients know so much about themselves, their history, and patients are willing to share. Have you seen anybody doing that well, or at least starting off?
Well, I'm one of the people who's trying their best to make it happen as soon as possible. And yeah, there's quite a lot of people, both in industry and actually in government, who are working on this very seriously right now.
And I think some of the work you're doing just to empower patients. I think patients really want to be involved in their healthcare.
Absolutely,
we know that,
and it's their right.
And it's their right, and people want to make decisions, and they should make good decisions. I think it's often hard for patients to get good information. I mean,
yes,
you're looking at that also when you consider making patients with, let's say, providing information about their own disease. You think you're going to provide them more information about their options, treatments, therapies?
Well, that's always a difficult thing to do because you don't want to be giving them medical advice in an unregulated way, and you also want to make sure that there's a lot of frankly bad information out there. So making sure that patients get the proper information is quite difficult. I think rather than being a curator, what you can just do is give them their information and let them do with it what they will.
Right, and I think that in and of itself is really big for patients.
It is.
Particularly in a generation where everybody is using Facebook and Twitter and everything else. I think one of the problems we always see is kind of what you mentioned, that it's wonderful for getting information out to people, but it's also terrible because you get wrong information. People look up the wrong things or crazy treatments or things that are not in their best interest. So I think, if people get into the right scheme of things with the right information, I think it's super critical.
I agree.
So what else? What else happened?
What else happened? That's keeping me pretty busy, honestly.
That sounds pretty impressive. And I should give a plug that you're part of Emerson Collective.
Yeah, a fantastic family office which does far more than just healthcare. We work in immigration, education, and social justice. So I'm part of a much larger machine.
Right, and I was visiting you a couple weeks ago. I noticed the Emerson is on Emerson Street, so it was very easy.
Oh, total coincidence! Absolute coincidence.
I forgot what street I needed to turn on, then it came to me when I was going around in circles. This might be the right street.
Yes.
But and I also know that you're developing a bunch of good people you're working with and everything. So.
I am. Yeah. No, building a team has actually been one of the. It's been one of the most rewarding and important things I've actually learned that you really need to do if you want to be successful. So that's been something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. It's hard to get. I think the key is, people want to follow good leaders. I think so. That's really a critical thing. So, you're a good leader. I think as you obviously are, people will follow. And I think I think we've all learned that no one does it by themselves.
Of course not. No.
Really great people. So that's great. Well, I don't want to take your whole talk because got to give your talk tonight.
It's kind of a little element of surprise left.
Right. So 5 o'clock, which is 4 hours from now, Chevy Chase Auditorium. You have a Hopkins badge, you can get in. And thank Reed Jobs for visiting us, and we'll see him tonight.
Thank you, Elliot. You're the best.
Our pleasure. All right. Let's see. End line.